Good evening, and welcome to our midweek meditation. Last week we heard our bishop's call for the ELCA to be a church not just of words, but of action. And I invited us last week to watch a musical evening with Ken Miedema and Christian activist and follower of Jesus, Shane Claiborne. Shane Claiborne is the founder and a member of the Simple Way community of Christians in Philadelphia. I thought we would continue the call to action today as I read some story from Shane Claiborne's book, The Irresistible Revolution. You've probably heard me tell this exact story before in worship at Redeemer. We'll end our evening with a song that I wrote, which I have shared with you many times. I'll show a video of a candle, which I think is appropriate, for the song is called Till the Night is O'er. Although you may have heard this song many times, it's my prayer that you would see its connection to the story that we read and to our call to action. We'll end our evening with that song in a version that I recorded many years ago. Shane Claiborne, a voice for the voiceless, not us. Not too long ago, those of us at the Simple Way were about to speak before a congregation. The person doing the introduction said, "These folks are a voice for the voiceless." And something inside me hurt. I gently corrected them. Everyone has a voice. I know many amazing people have used the old voice for the voiceless line, Oscar Romero, Mother Teresa, even the book of Proverbs. But it just felt strange. Perhaps we are too quick to assume folks cannot speak for themselves. We are not a voice for the voiceless. The truth is that there is a lot of noise out there drowning out quiet voices. And many people have stopped listening to the cries of their neighbors. Lots of folks have put their hands over their ears to drown out the suffering. Institutions have distanced themselves from the disturbing cries. When Paul writes in Romans 8 that the entire creation is groaning for its liberation, he goes on to say that we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly. This is the chorus of the generations of seemingly voiceless people that we have joined. And God has a special ear for their groaning, regardless of who else is listening. It's a beautiful thing when folks in poverty are no longer just a missions project, but become genuine friends and family with whom we laugh, cry, dream, and struggle. One of the verses I have grown to love is the one where Jesus is preparing to leave the disciples and says, "I no longer call you servants. Instead, I have called you friends." Servanthood is a fine place to begin, but gradually we move toward mutual love, genuine relationships. And that's when things get messy. When people begin moving beyond charity and toward justice and solidarity with the poor and oppressed, as Jesus did, they get in trouble. Once we are actually friends with folks in struggle, we start asking why people are poor, which is never as popular as giving to charity. One of my friends has a shirt marked with the words of late Catholic Bishop Dom Helder Camara. "When I fed the hungry, they called me a saint. When I asked why people are hungry, they called me a communist." Charity wins awards and applause, but joining the poor gets you killed. People do not get crucified for charity. People are crucified for living out a love that disrupts the social order, that calls forth a new world. People are not crucified for helping poor people. People are crucified for joining them. In Luke 14, Jesus tells us how to throw a party. Only he doesn't actually call it a party. He's talking to a bunch of religious folks, so he calls it a banquet. But he's talking about a party. He says, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed. I had never been to a party like that. All the parties my friends threw, Christian or not, were the ones where you invite people who are like you. Friends, relatives, rich neighbors. Yep. We must not have highlighted that verse. Here's Jesus telling us not to throw parties like that. A few years ago, I caught a glimpse of the kind of party Jesus wants us to throw, although it got us into some trouble. Philadelphia had begun to pass anti-homeless legislation, making it illegal to sleep in the parks, illegal to ask for money, illegal to lie down on the sidewalks. They even chose to implement it on Dr. King's birthday. Ironically, the reason for many of these laws was Love Park, which is a historic site in Philly known as a great place for skateboarding, which was also made illegal. Love Park was a place where homeless folks hung out. It was visible, safe, and central. Folks knew they could go there to give out food or clothing to people on the street. We used to go there back when we were in college, and there are some nice steam vents that kept people, and some big rats, warm. One of the city's boldest moves was passing an ordinance that banned all food from the park. Specifically, it reads, all persons must cease and desist from distributing food. And they began fining those of us who continued to share food. We started wondering what in the world it meant to love our neighbors as ourselves when they were being jailed for sleeping and eating. As St. Augustine said, an unjust law is no law at all. What did it mean to submit to authority and yet uphold God's law of love? Either we had to invite them into our home, which reached capacity, or we wanted to be out with them in solidarity. So we threw a party in Love Park. About 100 of us gathered in Love Park with homeless friends. We worshiped, sang, and prayed. Then we served communion, which was illegal. But with clergy and city officials there supporting us, and with police and the media surrounding us, we celebrated communion. Most of the police sat back and watched, not daring to arrest anyone, especially during communion. Then we continued the breaking of the bread by bringing in pizzas. It was a love feast. And then we slept overnight in the park with our homeless friends. We did that week after week with the police watching over us and the media standing by. And then one night after worship, as we slept under the love sign, which we had covered with a big question mark, the police circled the park and arrested all of us. Not the best wake-up call. We were taken to jail in handcuffs, but over and over many of us slept out, and over we were arrested, though sometimes the police were sympathetic and agreed that we should not be arrested for sleeping. A bunch of bigwig lawyers even called, offering to represent us. We were very thankful and invited them to come and support us, but we decided to be represented by a homeless friend who wouldn't be able to have fancy lawyers if he were alone. So our buddy Fonz agreed to be our spokesperson. As we stood before the judge, I wore a shirt that read, "Jesus was homeless." The judge asked me to step forward, and I did. He read my shirt aloud and said, I didn't know that. I said, "Yes, sir, in the scriptures Jesus says that foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." The judge paused pensively and said, "You guys might stand a chance." And we did. Before we went to court, we read all of the scriptures where Jesus warns the disciples that they will be dragged before courts and into jails, and they had new meaning for us. He warned them not to worry about what to say, so we didn't. When the time came for us to testify, Fonz stood up in court and said, "Your Honor, we think these laws are wrong." We said, "Amen," what he said. The district attorney had her stuff together. She was not joking around. We faced numerous charges, jail time, thousands of dollars in fines, and hours of community service. Imagine that. The judge said to the court, "What is in question here is not whether these folks broke the law. That is quite clear. What is in question is the constitutionality of the law." The DA shot back, "The constitutionality of the law is not before this court." And the DA threw her papers on the table. The judge retorted, "The constitutionality of the law is before every court. Let me remind the court that if it weren't for people who broke unjust laws, we wouldn't have the freedom we have. We'd still have slavery. That's the story of this country, from the Boston Tea Party to the Civil Rights Movement. These people are not criminals. They are freedom fighters. I find them all not guilty on every charge." The papers called it a revolutionary court decision, and the judge asked us for a Jesus Was Homeless t-shirt. We caught a glimpse of what Paul and Silas saw as they sang and prayed in that jail cell until the prison doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. Acts 16, verse 26. I began to believe that maybe Jesus really meant that's how we are to throw a party. And I knew that he meant it when he said, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." In fact, I remember thinking that if the world does not hate us, perhaps we should question whether we really are part of another kingdom. We live in a world that is desperate need of a party. We live in a world where Jesus invites us to a feast, to a banquet. What sort of a party shall we throw in a world where the night seems to be falling? How shall we be, and who shall we invite?
Till the night is o'er, till the fear is past, till the poor and lost have a home at last, till the captives all have been set free, till the ones oppressed us lift our eyes, look to the east, unbar the gates, prepare a feast, and with the lame, the blind, the poor, await God's justice at the open door, till Christ is present and the night is o'er. See, the night is o'er, and the fear is past, where the poor and lost find a home at last, where the captives all, unbound and free, with the ones oppressed, right before our eyes, not in some east, but within the gates, within the feast, within the lame, the blind, the poor, of the open door, there Christ is present, and the night is o'er. Come and lift your voice, let us live the song.